Hello, artisans. I've been working on getting together a workflow for portraiture, something that I can do relatively quickly using Photoshop more than Lightroom, starting in Lightroom. I have avoided buying actions or buying aftermarket kinds of things, primarily because it does magic and I don't learn anything. I mash a button, it does what it does, and I didn't really learn anything about Photoshop. So I've been working on trying to find a way to do what I want to do in Photoshop and learn from Photoshop instead of trying to use actions and A, spending the money, and B, not learn anything about Photoshop. So I've come up with a process that I'm going to run through here just to show you what it is that I go through to take this raw image and go. So the first thing that I do is I look at that image before I even start and make sure that it's appropriately sharp, and this one is. Next, I go to the camera calibration and pick a profile that gets to where I want to go. Clear is a little sharp, deep, not so much. Portrait softens things, which I don't like. I want to soften what I want to soften. I don't want the camera to do, or the software to do that for me. Vivid's a little bright. Anyway, I go down through here and find one. I think here this is kind of going where I wanted it to go, so I'll do deep. The next thing that I do in Lightroom is look at skin tone. There's a couple of things here going on. The first is we were out in the sun all weekend, so my model's got a little bit of red going. And the second thing is it's under this big tree, so there's a green cast to everything. Now, since I tend to make things too orange, I'll grab and go all the way blue and come up blue, come out of the blue until I'm happy with the skin tone, which ought to be about there in general. I still have a little bit of green to deal with because we're under the canopy of this tree, and you can really see that in her hair and along the side of her cheek here. Let me keep messing with this until I get it where I want it. That's about where I want it. But if you look here, see there's a green cast. There's just a green cast in there that I don't like. So I'm going to go ahead and change the tint and add a little magenta to take some of that green out. Right about maybe there. Oops, it slipped. I'm having trouble with my slider here. 14 or so. Taking some of that green out. It's not quite as bad. If we do a before and after, taking some of the orange out, gone more to blue, taking a good bit of the green out. So that's kind of a good starting place for us to go. It's a little red, but that's kind of the skin tones we were dealing with. I may put a little more blue in there after dealing with the magenta. Let's go back and touch it again. Yeah, somewhere in there. That's about all I do in Lightroom, is get the color balance and get the skin tone the way I want. And then we head for Photoshop. First thing that I do in Photoshop always is duplicate the layer because I want a non-destructive workflow. So after I get into Photoshop, the first thing I'm going to attack is any blemishes or things on the skin that I want to get rid of. So we'll zoom in and take a close look and see if there's anything that we want to zap with the spot healing brush, like a little makeup spot there, maybe a little spot there. It's nice to have this model because there's not a whole lot of stuff to do. We might get rid of some of those stray hairs. It's important to do whatever skin tone or blemishes or sunspots or whatever you want to do before you start doing any of the skin smoothing, because the smoother the tone is on the skin before you start the skin smoothing, the better it is. I'll zap some of these just while we're here. Given the lens that I used, most of this is out of focus anyway, and it's not going to be a big issue, but we'll grab some of them while we're here. And that's about all we'll do there. So we've got most of that stuff done. So now I'll duplicate the layer again. And here I've got an action written to do it. I'll go through the steps instead of just blowing through the action. But it's a really good way to smooth skin, and it's an inverted high pass filter. I'll have to open the action and go look at the action because it'll be faster for me not to make any mistakes and show you what to do in the action. If you record the action, you can do it in one shot, bang, it's done. But first we duplicate the layer. This is called an inverted high pass. So we put a high pass filter on it. Wrong one. Filter, other, high pass. Now, how many pixels the high pass filter is depends on the resolution of your camera. With the A7 II and 24 megapixels, I'm up at 10, 8, 9, 10. Actually, my action does it at 9. 9 or 10 is fine. If I go back and look at the pictures that I took with the D80, it's 6, 7, 8. It's just a little bit lower. So here I'll just do it at 9, which is what the filter is. Now the high pass filter is a sharpening filter. The next thing that we apply is a Gaussian blur, and that's a 3 pixel Gaussian blur. And then change the blend mode to linear light, and it's really sharp. So what we have to do is invert it. Select it, Control I, invert it, and now you can see it's got this weird double line thing going on. Next thing you need to do is get rid of that double vision piece. So if you double click on it and use the blend if option, hold down the Alt key and split the lower end and drag it up until you get rid of that double vision kind of thing. If you look at her eye, you can see when you get that double vision 2-line thing, you want to go up high enough that you get rid of most of that. It's usually 200, 210, 215, somewhere in there. So we've got this really nice soft skin. We've gotten rid of the double vision. We've got that blend if going to get rid of the double line. We've kind of moved it around to about where we need to be. Now we hold down the Alt key and put a layer mask on. Now you can see that's the original image. When we paint in white, we bring out that soft skin tone with that inverted high pass filter. So let's do a real quick. Let's touch it, and you can see it does really well for hot spots or highlights on the skin. I'm not going to be, in terms of demonstration mode, going through every little piece, but one of the things that you need to be aware of is being careful around the lips and around the nose and make it look unnatural if you're not. The other thing about skin softening here is when you soften the skin, that you're not wanting to look plastic, and I'll deal with that by changing the opacity of this layer. The next thing that you want to worry about when you're doing skin softening is to make sure to soften all the skin. If you do skin softening in some places and you don't do it in others, it just tends to look weird. Around features of the face, the chin line, the jawline, you want to make sure that you don't blur out the jawline or the skin. Now you can hit the backspace or backslash key to see where you're actually painting so that you don't miss any big areas. And I'll do this relatively quickly. I'm not too concerned about it. It's more the idea that I'm going for to show you what the workflow is than to make this a perfect example. Using the scroll wheel on the Wacom tablet to change the brush size. using the backslash key to make sure that I'm getting that I can see it more easily. Another thing you need to worry about is if you have any skin anywhere, make sure hands, face, little areas are done, because if you don't, it just tends to look a little strange. Zoom back out a little bit and see where we are. Maybe a little bit along here, a little bit in there. There, that's good enough. Now, one of the areas that you need to worry about is the little areas up here in the hair. Now, the problem is if you zap the hair starts looking soft and it kind of looks weird. So you kind of have to be careful about where you go when you're in the areas like that. But that's probably good enough. Let's hit the backslash key and come back out. Now you can see it's looking a little plastic here, especially around the mouth. Now you can change that by changing the flow of the brush or the opacity of your brush. I really don't often mess with that. I just change the opacity of the whole layer from 0 up to 50, 60, 70%. Make sure that the eyes are sharp. Make sure you didn't get any eyelashes around, or the eyebrows, or the lips. But there you can see it's still natural looking, but it's made a big difference in the skin tone, evening out the skin tones. Now, after we get through with this, the next thing that I will work on, zoom out and make sure that we've got relatively natural looking skin everywhere else. The next thing I'll work on is eyes. And so that we can do this workflow a little piece at a time, I'll do Control Alt Shift. It's Command Option Shift, I guess, on the Mac, and make a new layer that's a combination of all those layers to start working on that. So I've got a clean layer. This is where I've gotten so far. We've gone from there to there. So the next thing that I work on in any of the portraits that I do is the eyes. So let's Control J, copy the layer again, change the screen mode, change the blend mode to screen, which lightens it up. Layer mask it. We're painting white and brighten up her eyes. Now this is a really cool thing to do, and it does a lot to bring the eyes out, but you need to be careful of this one because it may not look terrible close in, but if you zoom out, it's real easy to get this Queen of the Damned thing going. So I make a rule that I got to go to 20%. I've got to have a big reason to get above 20% opacity on this because it just starts looking unnatural. It's easy for me to do that, and I've ruined a bunch of pictures by making that unnatural. Let's go down to about 16%. Just a little pop there. Yeah, that's about right. So let's go back to the blended layer, and we'll add another layer. Control J. We'll change the blend mode of this one to overlay. Now overlay increases contrast, and what we're trying to do is take the pupils of the eyes and brighten them up. Another layer mask, another paint in white. Let's zoom in to make this easier. It darkens the eyes and brings out the contrast of the pupils. Now here again, it's easy to make it too dark. So what you want to do is change that opacity down to where you've got some sharpness in the eyes without making it look unnaturally dark. There, add a little bit of contrast. The eyes are still bright. That's about right. I like it. Okay, so what we've done is brighten the eyes up a little bit, add a little bit of contrast by putting an overlay mask or an overlay blend mode on that layer to brighten the eyes up. Now we're there. So since we've done that with the eyes, let's go ahead since we're doing this non-destructively, blend all those layers in so we've got a single layer. Now, this is a little trick that I saw in one of the Scott Kelby videos, and it's really cool, and it adds just a little punch to the eyes that adds just that little finishing touch to the eyes. Let's bring a new layer in, select the ellipse selection tool, and make an ellipse. Not quite, let's do it this way, right about there, just inside the dark ring around the pupil. And then fill that, no, I want a little bit broader, right about maybe there. Still not like it. There, okay. Fill that with the background color, which is, or foreground color, which is Alt Delete so that you have a white one. Get the polygonal lasso tool and select the top 2/3 and hit delete. Bring that out. Deselect that. Control or Command click on the layer. Make sure that you have a selection tool selected and move that selection up just a touch to make like a little half moon. We'll delete that so that you've got this little half moon there. Deselect again. You've got this little half moon. Now the next thing that we do is go to the filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and blur that by 3 pixels. Change the blend mode to soft light, and now you've got this little kicker underneath the eye like you used one of those reflectors underneath. Let's duplicate that layer. Grab the move tool and move that little light over to the other eye. So now that we've got the same light in both eyes, blend those layers down so that so that both of them are on the same layer, and change the opacity until it looks real. Maybe 30%, 35%, something like that. It just adds a little pop to the eye, just a little definition in the eye. Really brightens the eyes up, and it's a neat little step that goes in there. You can see here, it brings the eyes out and the eyes pop. So let's go one more time. Zoom in and look at the portraiture piece of this. There's the pop of the eyes. Turn that layer off, turn that layer off, turn that layer off. Go all the way back down. So what we did, duplicated the layer, took care of any blemishes with that layer. There weren't many there. Softened the skin, combined it to that. Next, added a little darkness to the eyes with an overlay blend mode, and then reduce the opacity. Then lighten the eyes up. So that's where we got to. And then the final step, I forgot to turn it off, that final step is to pop that little pop in the eyes. Then the final piece of this, and I'll blend it all to a single layer again, is take the sharpen tool. Now the sharpen tool in old Photoshop used to just destroy things. We'll sharpen up the eyebrows, sharpen up the eyelashes a little bit. Run over the lips so that the specular highlights make the lips stand out a little bit. Zoom around the eyes just a touch. See where we got. So you can see it's small, but it's a really great change. Now the other thing that I will usually do, since my model tends to wear necklaces and jewelry, is to pop some of the jewelry out a little bit with the sharpening tool. Because the specular highlights pop out, and it makes a big difference on that jewelry. You want to try to stay off the skin to the extent that you can. you can see it just adds a little bit of sharpening. Now the jewelry and the specular highlights can take a lot more sharpening than just about anything else. Let's see what we got. Yep, see that little sharpness, even though that you've got all of that area is out of focus. Zoom out and see what we've got. There we go. Now that's that final layer. That's the final touch. So we'll go in and make all of these layers invisible, so that now that top layer is from start to finish. Let's fit the screen, close that, and you can see we started there and got to there. It's subtle. You really can't tell much has been done, but the pop in the eyes and the smoothing of the skin makes it all look natural and makes it all look easy to do. That's the process I go through whenever I touch anything that I'm going to do with a portrait. Get the color blend that I want, get the skin tone that I want in Lightroom, bring it to Photoshop, touch any blemishes on the skin, do a skin softening. In this case, you can follow along. Since I have this layer down and scrolled, you can use this to go and make your own inverted high pass action, which speeds that process up a great deal. Anyway, soften the skin, lighten the eyes, add some contrast to the eyes, put the little catch lights in the bottom of the eyes, and then do sharpening. And that's the process. I'm trying to make it quick and easy, so I know what I'm doing. I can change it easily. I know what the thing is instead of running an action, and make that difference. That's what I wanted to show you. If you have any questions, give me a holler. That's the process that I've tried to replicate.